Star Trek, Primitive Passenger Season 3, Episode 4, The Iridium Throne. The vast expanse of space stretched beyond the viewports of Empok Nor, but Nolan Mercer barely noticed it anymore. He sat behind his desk in the operations center, eyes blazed as he scrolled through endless production reports. The monotonous hum of machinery seemed to mirror the dullness he felt inside. Another day, another metric ton of iridium, he muttered, tapping the holographic display to show real-time refining operations. As efficient workers moved through the facility on the screen, Nolan's mind drifted, transporting him back to a pivotal moment 2 years earlier. He found himself sitting on the other side of this very desk, facing the smug visage of Gul Ducote. "Think of the possibilities, Mercer," Ducote had said, his voice dripping with false camaraderie. "With your expertise, we could triple our iridium output." Nolan remembered his skepticism, the way his stomach had turned at Ducote's next words. "We have plenty of Bajoran laborers who would be grateful for the opportunity." "No," Nolan had said firmly, his jaw set. "If I run this station, it'll be with my people, a professional crew, paid fair wages, Ducote." The memory faded, leaving Nolan back in the present. He stood, stretching muscles stiff from inactivity, and moved toward the center of ops. The quiet efficiency of his crew surrounded him as he walked. A young manager approached, datapad in hand. "Mr. Mercer, the latest production figures for your review." "Thank you, Tal," Nolan replied, his tone gentle despite his inner restlessness. He glanced at the figures. "Everything running smoothly?" "Yes, sir. We're actually 2% above projected output for the quarter." Nolan nodded, mustering a ghost of a smile. "Good work. Make sure the night shift knows they're appreciated." As Tal moved away, Nolan's restlessness finally overcame him. He strode purposefully toward the turbolift, his destination clear in his mind. The doors opened onto the bustling promenade, and as he made his way toward docking pylon 1, Alara caught up with him, matching his brisk pace. "Another excursion to the Delta Quadrant?" Alara asked, her tone a mix of curiosity and concern. Nolan nodded, his eyes fixed ahead, "Just picking up some specialty items." "Specialty items," Alara repeated, recognition dawning in her voice. "You mean weapons?" "Among other things," Nolan replied, a hint of his old excitement creeping into his voice. They reached the airlock where Carol, Nolan's personal ship, waited. Ilara's holographic form stopped at the threshold as Nolan boarded. "Don't wait up." Inside Carol's cockpit, Nolan settled into the pilot's seat. He hammered in the startup sequence and began pre-flight. "Ready for another adventure, kitten?" he asked. She never replied. As the docking clamps released, Nolan guided Carol away from Empok Nor. The station rapidly shrank in the view screen, becoming just another speck of light among the stars. With a final glance at the place that had become both his domain and his prison, Nolan engaged the blink drive. In a flash of light, Carol disappeared, leaving behind the monotony of Empok Nor Nolan. Nolan guided Carol through the bustling space lanes of the Delta Quadrant station, his earlier boredom replaced by a keen alertness. He docked the ship with practiced efficiency, his movements quick and purposeful. As he stepped onto the station, the cacophony of alien languages and the pungent mix of unfamiliar scents washed over him. Something that at first repulsed him now just smelled like adventure. The weapons bazaar sprawled before him, a maze of stalls and shops offering everything from simple phasers to exotic energy weapons. Nolan moved from vendor to vendor, his eyes sharp as he examined the merchandise. He paused at a local arms dealer's stall, running his fingers over the smooth casing of a cutting-edge phaser rifle. "Interested in the latest model, friend?" the merchant asked, her black enameled teeth gleaming in a wide smile. Nolan nodded, his voice low but firm. "What's the range on this one?" As they discussed specifications and haggled over price, Nolan's attention was drawn to a commotion near the far end of the bazaar. A group of rough-looking aliens were hassling a figure in a hooded cloak. Something about the way the cloaked individual moved struck Nolan as oddly familiar. Deal struck and new weapons secured, Nolan made his way to a dimly lit space bar adjacent to the bazaar. He ordered a drink and settled into a corner booth, his posture relaxed but his senses on high alert. From his vantage point, he could observe most of the bar's patrons, including the group of aliens he'd seen earlier. They were loudly celebrating some recent success, their raucous laughter cutting through the general murmur of the bar. As Nolan sipped his drink, the cloaked figure from the bazaar entered the bar. In the better light, he could see it was a woman, her face partially obscured by the hood. She moved with an unnatural grace that nagged at Nolan's memory. When she turned to order a drink, he caught a glimpse of metal gleaming at her temple, a former Borg. Nolan watched as she scanned the room, her gaze lingering on the group of rowdy aliens. Her posture tensed, and she quickly looked away, but not before Nolan noticed the flash of fear in her eyes. Intrigued and somewhat concerned, Nolan continued to observe both the woman and the alien group. He didn't approach either, but kept his attention sharp, waiting to see how events might unfold. The familiar thrill of potential danger coursed through him, a welcome change from the mindless tedium of Empok Nor. As the night wore on, the former Borg woman seemed to gather her courage. She approached Nolan's table, her movements cautious but determined. "You're not from around here," she said, her voice low and tinged with a mechanical undertone. Nolan gestured to the empty seat across from him. "What gave me away?" She sat, pushing back her hood to reveal more of her face. Implants glinted along her jawline and temple. "You watch. You listen. Most here only look for their next score or their next fight. And which are you looking for?" Nolan asked, his tone neutral but curious. Her cybernetic eye whirred softly as she studied him. "Neither. I'm looking for help." As they talked, the former Borg revealed a disturbing trend. "The pirates have gotten bold," she explained, her cybernetic eye whirring softly as she spoke. "They've figured out how to make glancing attacks on board cubes and spheres." Nolan leaned forward, his interest piqued. "Go on." "They swoop in, just long enough to transport about 100 drones into their cargo holds. To the cube, it's barely a nuisance. They've got thousands more where those came from." "And the drones?" Nolan asked, his voice tight. "EMP, or some sort of pulse," she said flatly. "Disconnects them from the collective. Then it's a coin toss. Either they're killed for their tech, or if they're still functional, it's off to die in the mines." Nolan's hand tightened around his glass, his knuckles whitening. "Where?" he asked, his tone leaving no room for evasion. The former Borg hesitated, then nodded toward a group of rough-looking aliens at the bar. "Ask them, but be careful. They don't take kindly to outsiders asking questions." Nolan stood, tossing a few extra credits on the table. "Thank you for the information," he said to the woman. "Stay safe." He waited a few moments before following the pirates out into the station's corridors, keeping a discreet distance. His mind raced with possibilities as he trailed them, the familiar thrill of the hunt coursing through his veins. Nolan trailed the group of pirates through the station's winding corridors, his footsteps silent and his senses alert. As they approached the docking bays, the youngest among them, a lanky male with a shock of green hair, peeled away from the group. "Don't forget the deuterium filters this time, Rolfo." One of the older pirates called after him, "And hurry up." Rolfo waved acknowledgement and set off in the opposite direction. Nolan hesitated for a moment, then made his decision. He followed the young pirate, keeping to the shadows and ducking behind support pillars when necessary. The chase led them through a maze of corridors, each turn taking them deeper into the station's bowels. Rolfo whistled tunelessly as he walked, seemingly without a care in the world. As he approached a turbolift, Nolan saw his opportunity. Just as the doors began to close, Nolan lunged forward, slipping inside at the last second. Rolfo's eyes widened in surprise, but before he could speak, Nolan's hand shot out, slamming the emergency stop button. The turbolift shuddered to a halt, and Nolan turned to face the young pirate. In one fluid motion, he had Rolfo pinned against the wall, forearm pressing against his throat. The board drones, Nolan growled, his voice low and dangerous. "Where are you keeping them? Where are the mines?" To Nolan's surprise, Rolfo laughed, a high, nervous sound. "Is that all? Hell, you could have just asked, old man. Not that it'll do you any good." Nolan eased the pressure on Rolfo's throat, but kept him pinned. "Explain. Those places, they're fortresses, man. Satellite grid, full sensor detection. And that's just the start. You'd never get within a light year before our ships turned you into space dust." Nolan's mind raced, processing the information. Part of him admired the young pirate's bravado, even in this situation. But a colder, more practical part knew he couldn't let Rolfo go. The risk was too great. Slowly, Nolan stepped back, releasing Rolfo. "I appreciate your candor," he said, his voice softening slightly. "For that, you get to live." Relief washed over Rolfo's face as Nolan reached for the turbolift controls. The young pirate let out a shaky breath, his shoulders sagging as the tension left his body. In that moment of relaxation, Nolan struck. His hands moved with brutal efficiency, learned in countless battles across the galaxy. There was a sickening crack as he snapped Rolfo's neck. The young pirate's body crumpled to the floor, his eyes still wide with surprise. Nolan stood over him for a moment, a flicker of regret passing across his face. But it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by grim determination. As the turbolift doors opened, Nolan stepped out, leaving Rolfo's body behind. His mind was already stepping through potential plans. The pirate's defenses were formidable, but he'd faced worse odds before. And now, with the lives of those bored drones hanging in the balance, he had a purpose again. Nolan moved swiftly through the station's corridors, heading back to where he'd docked Carol. It was time to show these pirates why he'd earned his fearsome reputation across 2 quadrants. Back on Empok Nor, the operations center hummed with activity. Ilara stood at the central console, her form solid and present despite her AI nature. Her eyes flicked between multiple screens, each demanding her attention. On the main view screen, a Cardassian official with the insignia of a gill furrowed his ridged brow. "These production reports are satisfactory, but where is Mercer? We expected him to oversee the new Iridium purification process personally." Ilara's voice remained calm and professional. "I assure you, Gildemar, that Mr. Mercer is attending to urgent business. I've forwarded all relevant data on the new process. Is there anything specific you need clarification on?" The Cardassian's frustration was evident. "That's not the point. Mercer needs to contact us at his earliest convenience. Make sure he understands the importance of this." As the transmission ended, Ilara noticed a flashing light on another console. The persistent UFP representative was calling again. She sighed, a remarkably human gesture for an AI, and tapped the console to read the message. "Empok Nor Station, this is Lieutenant Commander Tamel of Starfleet. We request an update on the status of our dilithium shipments from your sector. Please respond at your earliest convenience." Before Ilara could formulate a response, a third console emitted a soft beep. The message that played was barely audible, a whisper that seemed to echo through the room despite its low volume. "The wind whispers secrets, the desert hides truths. Mercer must know. The old paths are opening." Ilara frowned, trying to decipher the cryptic message from Shakar. It was the third such communication this week, each more obscure than the last. At a nearby station, Karras, a man whose past was almost as murky as Nolan's, raised an eyebrow. "Ilara, the volume of incoming transmissions has increased by 47% over the past hour. Is there a situation we should be aware of?" Ilara turned to address him, her expression composed despite the mounting pressure. "Nothing we can't handle, Lieutenant. Though I must admit Mr. Mercer's timing for a trade mission is inconvenient." D. Tora, a young Bajoran at the communications array, chimed in. "It's not just the transmissions. We've had 3 requests for emergency docking in the last 2 hours. That's more than we usually see in a week." Ilara nodded, processing the information. Thank you, Ensign. Please prioritize any ships with medical emergencies. For the rest, direct them to docking pylons 3 and 4 for now. As she turned back to the main console, Ilara couldn't help but feel a twinge of concern. Nolan had a knack for finding trouble, and his sudden departure, coupled with this increase in station activity, left her uneasy. She began composing a message to send to Carol, knowing it might be hours or even days before Nolan responded. The operations center continued its hum of activity, but there was an undercurrent of tension. Something was building, and Ilara found herself wishing, not for the first time, that she could be in 2 places at once. Nolan made his way back through the station's bustling corridors, his mind racing with plans. He found the former Borg woman in a quiet corner of the bazaar, her eyes darting nervously as she examined spare parts. "I need your help," Nolan said, approaching her. "I'm going after those pirates." She turned, surprise evident on her partially mechanical face. "You're either very brave or very stupid. I'm Zira, by the way, Nolan Mercer. And I'm a bit of both," he replied with a grim smile. "Will you join me?" Zira hesitated, then nodded. "I have a ship. Small, but well-armed. It might prove useful." Within the hour, they were spaceborne. Carol and Zira's vessel hung close together in the inky void of space. "Ready." Nolan's voice crackled over the comm. "Affirmative," Zira replied. In a flash, both ships blinked out of existence, reappearing light years away near a nondescript planet. "By the collective," Zira breathed, her voice filled with awe. "How did you—" "Later," Nolan cut her off gently. "What can you tell me about the defenses?" Zira's fingers flew over her console. "I'm detecting a network of satellites, sensor arrays, weapons platforms, ground-based shield generators protecting what appear to be mining facilities." Nolan studied his own readouts. "Looks like they've got atmospheric fighters, too. Small, but numerous." "The main compound is heavily fortified," Zira added. "I'm reading significant power signatures, likely force fields and disruptor banks." Nolan's eyes narrowed as he took in the formidable defenses. "Any sign they've detected us?" "Negative," Zira replied. "Your transportation method seems to have bypassed their early warning systems." A slow smile spread across Nolan's face. "That gives us the element of surprise. Here's what we're going to do." As Nolan outlined his daring plan, the 2 ships hung silently in space, their occupants preparing to unleash chaos on the unsuspecting pirate stronghold. Ilara strode into the cargo control room, her face set in a mask of concentration. Vex, a Trillandorian blend with vibrant blue spots trailing down his neck, looked up from his console. "Ah, Ilara, I've got those cargo manifests you requested," he said, gesturing to a nearby screen. Ilara nodded, her eyes already scanning the data. "Thank you, Lieutenant. Let's see what we can find." For the next hour, they pored over the logs, cross-referencing shipments, routes, and inventories. As they worked, a pattern began to emerge. "There," Ilara said, pointing to a series of entries. "Do you see it?" Vex leaned in, his brow furrowed. "The discrepancies. They're not random. It's always the same types of cargo. High-value minerals, weapons-grade materials. And always along these 3 routes," Ilara finished. "This isn't simple piracy. It's too targeted." As if on cue, a red alert flashed across the main screen. Vex's fingers flew over the controls. "Incoming transmission," he reported. "It's the PSS Tropar. They're under attack." Ilara's form tensed. On screen, the view screen flickered to life, showing a Cardassian freighter under heavy fire from sleek, unidentified ships. "Empok Nor, this is Captain Rekad," a harried voice came through. "We're outnumbered and outgunned. Request immediate assistance." "Hold on, Captain," Ilara responded. "Help is on the way." She turned to Vex. "Deploy defense squadrons. I'll blink them into the fight. And get me a secure channel to Nolan now." As Vex carried out her orders, Ilara strode out of the cargo control room. her mind racing. This attack, coming on the heels of their discoveries, couldn't be a coincidence. In her office, Ilara initiated a priority transmission to Carol. "Nolan, we have a situation. Multiple cargo ships attacked. Pattern of losses discovered. Your input is crucial. Please respond immediately." She waited, the seconds ticking by agonizingly slow. No response came. Ilara began pacing, her steps measured and precise. Computer log entry. Given the current security situation and Nolan Mercer's absence, I am implementing the following measures, Ilara began, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. First, increase patrols along all major shipping lanes. Second, establish a task force to investigate the cargo losses and recent attacks. Third, as she outlined her plans, Ilara couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Whatever storm was brewing, she was determined to weather it, with or without Nolan by her side. "Pooh." Zira listened intently as Nolan outlined his plan. Her cybernetic eye whirred softly as she processed the information. "Your ship's capabilities are impressive," Zira said, a note of admiration in her voice. "But the risk is significant. Are you certain about this course of action?" Nolan's face set in determination. "I've faced worse odds. These people need our help, and we're their best shot. I promise that if all else fails, I'll get you out safely." Zira nodded, her remaining organic eye reflecting a mix of hope and trepidation. "Very well. I'll follow your lead." "Good," Nolan replied. He leaned forward, fingers hovering over Carol's controls. "On my mark, we'll blink inside their defense grid. I'll focus on taking out their ground defenses and ships. Remember, phasers only for the ground-based targets. We don't want to risk collapsing any mine shafts." "Understood," Zira confirmed. "And once you've cleared a path, I'll designate a landing zone for you. Once you're down, I'll provide air cover while you extract our people." Nolan paused, considering. "You said you can lock onto life forms with bored nanoprobes." Zira nodded. "Yes, it's the same technique the pirates use to pull Borg from the cubes. But my ship's capacity is limited." "No problem," Nolan said, a hint of a smile playing at his lips. "We'll beam them directly to Carol. She's got plenty of room." As they finalized the details of their plan, a palpable tension filled both ships. Nolan's hands moved swiftly over Carol's controls, prepping her weapons systems and reinforcing her shields. "Ready?" "We're going in hot," he asked, his voice steady despite the impending danger. "Ready," Zira confirmed, her own ship humming to life. Nolan took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on the pirate stronghold looming before them. "Then let's go break some shit." Initiating blink in 3, 2, 1. In a flash of light, both ships vanished, only to reappear moments later in the heart of the pirates' defenses. Almost immediately, alarms blared across the compound as the pirates scrambled to respond to the unexpected threat. Carol's weapons came to life, lancing out with precise bursts of energy that shattered defensive emplacements and sent pirate ships spiraling out of control. Zira's smaller vessel darted in Carol's wake, adding its firepower to the assault. As chaos erupted around them, Nolan felt a familiar thrill course through him. The overwhelming boredom of Empok Nor seemed a distant memory now. Here, in the heat of battle, he was truly alive. The Stelp. Ilara stood in the operations center, her posture relaxed as she received the report from the defense squadron leader. "The convoy is safe, Ilara," the Andorian captain's voice crackled through the comm. "We managed to drive off the attackers." A wave of relief washed over Ilara. "Excellent work, Captain Thalen. Were you able to identify the aggressors?" There was a pause before Thalen responded, his tone tinged with frustration. "Negative. They retreated before we could get a solid ID. Some of their ships appeared damaged, but they managed to slip away." Ilara's brow furrowed. "Why didn't you pursue? We need to know who's behind this." "The convoy requested we stay and assist with casualties," Thalen explained. "We blinked back with wounded, then returned to continue our patrol of the shipping lanes." Ilara nodded, even though Thalen couldn't see her. Understood, Captain. You made the right call. Keep me updated on any further developments. As the communication ended, Elara turned her attention to another console. She initiated a priority transmission to Carol, her voice soft but urgent. Nolan, please respond. We've had a situation here that requires your attention. The silence that followed was expected, but no less concerning. Elara was acutely aware of the multiple short-range blinks Nolan had been executing, sometimes including another ship. She knew what that meant. He was in the thick of it, doing what he did best. For a moment, she considered going after him. The thought of Nolan in danger, potentially outnumbered and outgunned, sent a surge of concern through her systems. But she also missed the days of runnin' and gunnin', as Nolan called it. No, she murmured to herself. He's doing what he loves out there. Better to leave him to it. Her musings were interrupted by a young operations officer. Elara, we've just received a request to dock from Glenn DeMar's ship. Elara couldn't suppress a weary laugh. Because today is already going so well, she muttered. Louder, she added. Very well. Grant them clearance. I'll meet DeMar in the docking bay. Her day was far from over, and she had a feeling it was about to get a lot more complicated. The sleek black hull of Carol streaked toward the mining operation, her weapons systems blazing to life. Phaser fire lanced out, precise bursts slamming into ground-based defenses. Particle beams sliced through the air, cutting thin, deadly lines through ships as they struggled to lift off or descend from above. Nolan's hands hammered the controls, his eyes darting between tactical displays and the view screen. LZ coordinates incoming. Zira, he called out, his voice tight with concentration. Zira's smaller ship followed in Carol's wake, picking off additional ground targets as she angled toward the planet's surface. Her vessel touched down in a swirl of dust, shields flickering as they deflected debris and stray weapons fire. Nolan brought Carol around in a wide arc, facing the oncoming swarm of pirate ships. It seemed every opportunist and cutthroat in the sector was converging on their position, desperate to protect their easy meal ticket. Carol weaved through the chaotic melee, her weapons never silent for more than a heartbeat. Phasers, disruptors, and particle beams lashed out in all directions. The gleaming black hull of the ship became a canvas for a frenzied light show, flashes of weapons fire reflecting off her surface in a swirling array of deadly neon. Nolan, Zira's voice cut through the din of battle. I've got a full ship, 22 rescued. You need to take them. I show at least 75 more still down there. Without hesitation, Nolan swung Carol back toward the planet's surface, her aft weapons finally getting their turn in the fight. Send me all your transporter locks, he ordered. Hurry. As Zira's fingers flew across her console, transmitting the data, Nolan prepared for a dangerous maneuver. He'd have to lower Carol's shields to beam aboard the rescued Borg, leaving the ship vulnerable. Hello, he shouted, dropping the shields. In that instant, Carol shuddered under a barrage of fire from the smaller ships. A damaged ground emplacement, stubbornly clinging to functionality, managed to land a glancing blow. But Nolan's gambit paid off. In a series of rapid transports, he beamed aboard not just the 22 from Zira's ship, but all of the Borg still trapped in the mines. The ship's hold filled with the confused and frightened former drones, their cybernetic implants glinting in the emergency lighting. Zira's ship was already airborne, rocketing straight up from the planet's surface. Let's get out of here. Her voice crackled over the comm, tinged with equal parts exhilaration and fear. Right behind you, Nolan assured her, his fingers flying over the controls. Ready. In a flash, Zira and her small ship blinked out of existence, reappearing at their original coordinates outside the defensive grid. But Carol remained, still climbing away from the planet. Nolan focused in, a crooked smile playing at the corner of his mouth. Now, he murmured, let's make sure these bastards can't hurt anyone else. Carol's weapons came to life once more, this time targeting the heart of the pirate operation. Power generators exploded in brilliant flashes, defense grids flickered and died, and command centers crumbled under the relentless assault. As alarms blared and explosions rocked the compound below, Nolan felt a familiar thrill course through him. This was what he lived for, not the monotony of running a station, but the adrenaline-fueled rush of blowing stuff up and melting bad guys. With a final, devastating barrage, Nolan brought the pirate operation to its knees. Only then, with the job well and truly done, did he engage Carol's blink drive. In a heartbeat, the ship vanished, leaving behind a scene of destruction and liberation. The pirates' reign of terror was over, and nearly 100 former Borg had been given a second chance at life. As Carol reappeared alongside Zira's ship, Nolan let out a long, satisfied breath. The day's work was far from over. There were rescued drones to care for, and no doubt repercussions to face. But for now, he allowed himself a breath. He'd remembered who he was, out here among the stars, and he had no intention of forgetting again. Ilara strode purposefully toward the docking bay, her mind racing with potential scenarios and diplomatic strategies. The rhythmic click of her boots against the station's deck plates echoed through the corridors, a steady counterpoint to the tumult of her thoughts. As she approached the airlock, Ilara took a moment to compose herself. She smoothed down her uniform, a habit she'd picked up from years of observing humans, and took a deep breath she didn't physically need. The gesture, however unnecessary, helped center her thoughts. The airlock cycled open with a hiss, revealing Glenn DeMar and his entourage. The Cardassian's face was a mask of barely contained frustration, his scaled features set in hard lines. "Glenn DeMar," Ilara greeted him, her voice cool and professional. "Welcome to Empok Nor. I trust your journey was uneventful." DeMar's eyes searched left and right, then back to Ilara. "Where is Mercer?" he demanded, ignoring the pleasantries. Ilara didn't miss a beat. "Mr. Mercer is currently engaged in urgent business off-station. I assure you, I am fully authorized to address any concerns you may have." As DeMar launched into a tirade about production quotas and security concerns, Ilara found her thoughts drifting momentarily to Nolan. She could almost see him now, Carol's sleek form dancing through a hail of weapons fire, that familiar glint of excitement in his eyes. A pang of something akin to envy flickered through her circuits. She missed being out there, feeling the thrill of combat, the satisfaction of outwitting an enemy, being at Nolan's side. But she pushed away the thought. Her place was here, managing the empire they'd built together. DeMar's voice cut through her musings. "Are you even listening?" he snapped. "This is precisely why Mercer needs to be here. How can we trust our interests are being properly managed when he's constantly gallivanting across the quadrant?" Ilara's eyes locked onto DeMar's, her gaze steady and unwavering. "Glenn DeMar," she said, her voice carrying a hint of steel beneath its calm exterior. "I've been managing Cardassian interests alongside Nolan Mercer for considerably longer than you've been alive. I remember when your own mother was a young Glenn, standing at the table with Mercer and myself. I assure you, your concerns are not only heard but are being actively addressed." She gestured towards the promenade. "Now, shall we discuss the new Iridium purification facility over a glass of Kanar? I believe you'll find our latest production figures quite impressive." As she led the somewhat stunned Cardassian delegation towards the bar just off the promenade, Ilara allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. She might not be out there fighting alongside Nolan, but she was waging battles of her own here on the station, and she was damn good at it. The Empire was in good hands, she mused. Nolan's out there making waves, and I'm here, keeping the ship steady. Together, we're unstoppable. With that thought bolstering her confidence, Ilara prepared to navigate the treacherous waters of Cardassian politics. It was going to be a long day, but she was begrudgingly up for the challenge. The golden light of the setting sun bathed the colony in warm hues as Nolan and Zira walked side by side. The air was filled with a mix of voices, some bearing the faint mechanical undertones of former Borg, others wholly organic. They passed an outdoor triage area where the newly rescued drones received medical attention. Doctors and nurses, some with visible implants themselves, moved efficiently among the patients, tending to both physical and psychological needs. "This planet is remarkable," Nolan commented, his eyes taking in the harmonious blend of nature and civilization. "You've built quite a home here." Zira nodded, a hint of pride in her voice. "It's taken time, but we've created a sanctuary for those seeking to reclaim their individuality. Not all our inhabitants are former Borg, but we've found common ground in our desire for peace and self-determination." They approached a modest dwelling nestled among flowering trees. "This is my home," Zara said, gesturing to the structure. "Would you care to come in for some refreshment? We have a local fruit juice that's considered very invigorating." Inside, Zira poured 2 glasses of a vibrant purple liquid. As they sipped and chatted, Nolan began to feel a spreading warmth through his body. "What exactly is in this?" he asked, holding up the nearly empty glass. Zira's cybernetic eye whirred softly as she looked at him. "Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you understood when I said invigorating." Nolan shifted uncomfortably, suddenly very aware of a growing predicament. I seem to be experiencing some unexpected effects." With a fluid motion, Zira moved closer, straddling Nolan's lap. The air between them crackled with tension. "Don't you feel invigorated, Mercer?" she murmured, leaning in to nuzzle his neck. "I know I do." As the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, the view pulled back from the little house. The sounds of the colony settling in for the night mingled with the gentle rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. Nature's lullaby for a world finding its own unique path to harmony. Epilogue. The massive docking doors of Empok Nor's repair bay groaned open as Carol was hauled in by tenders. Her sleek black hull marred by scorch marks and impact craters, large chunks of ablative armor blown away. Ilara watched from the control room as she catalogued the damage. "That'll be 8 bars, yes," I said bars. "Mr. Mercer, 8 bars of gold-pressed latinum." Nolan sauntered into ops, a spring in his step, as if he'd just returned from a full-body massage rather than a harrowing battle. He approached Ilara, seemingly oblivious to the week's worth of chaos he'd missed, and the 20-odd emergency messages she'd left him. "Anything going on while I was out?" he asked nonchalantly. "Anything I need to jump into now?" Ilara paused, a week's worth of crises, diplomatic incidents, and near-disasters flashing through her circuits in an instant. "Nope," she replied, her voice steady. "Nothing that can't wait." "Awesome," Nolan grinned. "I knew you could handle it." Without warning, he smacked her holographic backside with a resounding crack. "Nolan," Ilara exclaimed, smacking him on the chest. "I've wanted to do that ever since you showed me your Matrix, girl," Nolan said, breaking into an oddly smooth dance, making guns with his fingers. "You are one hot AI." Ilara's face broke into a wide smile, shaking her head, caught between amusement and disbelief at Nolan's antics. "You think I'm hot now? Wait till you try to smack my backside in ops again," she teased. "I'm a hologram. I can turn off my pain receptors and kick your ass, Mr. Bobber." Mercer, making a gesture like turning a switch on the side of her head. "Now that sounds like a challenge," Nolan yelled as he disappeared into the lowering turbolift. Several crew members in ops burst into laughter, quickly stifling themselves as they remembered where they were. As the sound of Nolan's chuckles faded, Ilara shook her head, a fond smile playing on her lips. "Lock up your wives and daughters. Nolan's running on pure adrenaline," she said under her breath, though it was likely a legitimate warning. Despite the chaos of the past week, despite the mountains of work still ahead, she couldn't help but feel a surge of affection for her incorrigible human partner. This was Nolan at his best, irreverent, unpredictable, and utterly alive. This is when he does great things. She folded her arms and just watched where the turbolift had been, again shaking her head. As she turned back to her duties, Ilara knew that whatever Nolan had been up to in the Delta, however harrowing, was like a vacation for him. Breaking stuff, he'd say, usually leaving a trail of bodies or ships in his wake.